Colonel Layton, we've heard a lot about drones being used in the Iran war, and for the first time, CENTCOM says that the U.S. used a sea drone in combat. Tell us about the significance of that.
Yeah, that's really significant, Pamela. One of the key things here is when you look at the actual explosions that are a part of this, this was a dry dock that the Iranians used, and you can see the sea drone moving forward into the dry dock area. And the dry docks are used for maintenance for ships, and here you can see the color view from the sea drone's perspective that looks like a mini submarine that was in dry dock there. And blowing that up is, of course, a very significant thing. It allows us to get in there using these sea drones without risking personnel. It allows us to get in there, without really putting in danger not only the forces that would have to take over this particular area, but also air crews potentially who could be used in an attack like this. So this is a major achievement from the Navy's perspective, and it kind of mimics what's going on in the Ukraine war. Because the Ukrainians have been able to use sea drones to great effect against the Black Sea Fleet. They've basically eliminated the Russian Black Sea Fleet, and they're now going after commercial vessels in the Black Sea. Here, what we're doing is we're going after those small boats and those submarines that even mini submersibles that the Iranians have, and that, of course, is a very significant thing.
Yeah, it was interesting because I was just overseas on the USS Abraham Lincoln, and the military officials I spoke to said they learned a lot from Russia's war on Ukraine in terms of drone warfare and how much it has changed modern warfare. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, so one of the key things here, this is a Saronic. This is one of the U.S. Navy's above surface drones, and it was actually used in the rescue operation for the Apache helicopter crew that was forced to ditch their aircraft in the Persian Gulf. So it's used for search and rescue missions. They did that for the first time. It's also, of course, used as an attack platform. And because it is part of that, it really is, an evolution from what we had before. When you look at how we started out with things, we started out with the Predator back in the late 90s, early 2000s. That became, first in the intelligence community, was part of the mix that they had. But then it was used by the Air Force, not only for reconnaissance purposes, but also, for example, using Hellfire missiles and Tomahawk missiles to go after the various elements that would be potentially providing danger to U.S. forces, and also as an offensive weapon that it can be used to go after those areas that would be there. And then, of course, we also had the Global Hawk. This was a high-altitude platform. The Predator was a lower altitude platform. This has a huge range of 12,300 nautical miles, can stay up for 34 hours, and it is a good launch platform and also a great reconnaissance platform as well. So that's how we started. But then when you go back to some of the things that we can do nowadays, the Saronic is an example of that, of vessels that are not only surface vessels, but then we also have, of course, much smaller drones that are in the air as well.
So the U.S. is using drones, obviously, but also Iran is, and it's really been trying to use that to its advantage because they're significantly cheaper, and sometimes the U.S. has to use these more expensive weapons to take down the threat. Tell us about that.
That is so true. For example, the Iran Shahed 136. So it's a relatively small aircraft when you look at it, but it's still noticeable. It's 8.2 feet with its wingspan, has a range of about 1,200 miles, costs only $20,000. So that's an important number to keep in mind here. And when you see the Shahed take off, it is an aircraft that can be seen in a way that you don't normally expect aircraft to fly, but it is a fairly effective weapon. Now, when you look at the Shahed 136, we mentioned the $20,000 cost. A standard missile or a Patriot interceptor, they cost between $3 and $4 million apiece. So that's the difference. Now, having said this, there are U.S. weapon systems that are being used that cost much less than this. For example, there's a weapon system that's being used on actual missiles that are and rockets that are fired by aircraft that costs only $40,000. Not quite the $20,000 that we have with the Shahed, but much cheaper than $3 or $4 million.
Brett, you heard Trump tonight threaten to knock out all of Iran's bridges and power plants. By the way, this is a threat that he's made before, right? Back when he was talking about wiping a civilization off the map. In that era of this rhetoric, he had made specific threats against the bridges and power plants. But now here we are again with this sort of a threat. What's your reaction to it now?
I think Kevin just said casting about. I think that's a pretty good way to put it. Both the United States and Iran, I think you just see casting about on both sides. I think the problem with that threat is problematic on its face, but also I'm not sure the Iranians take it seriously. But if they do take it seriously, Aaron, again, it is the Revolutionary Guard that is in charge in Tehran, and they will strike infrastructure in the Gulf. I mean, that is basically what they said. I think they have proven that demonstrated willingness and capacity to do that. So then you're in a war targeting each other's civilian infrastructure, and that can really damage the global economy. That's the problem of one of many problems here.
Yeah, and as we all remember, right, when desalination plants were suddenly on the table, right, when that's sort of what brought this whole thing to a halt, that would be a global economic catastrophe with an incredible loss of civilian life. General Kimmitt, Trump was asked tonight about the possibility of a ground campaign, right? So once again, bridges and power plants being threatened, but also ground troops. Here's the exchange.
Are you ruling out a ground campaign in a limited capacity?
I don't want to say that either, but I would say no if I thought it was appropriate. I'd say sometimes you need a ground campaign, but we have other people that will do the ground campaign for us.
Okay, General, I have many questions from this, but I guess let's just go with two of them. First of all, what would a ground campaign at this point for the U.S. actually mean, right? We're now in month 5. And when he says someone's going to do it for us, I mean, who is that? Are we back to the Kurds again?
Well, first of all, I'd just like to make a comment about bridges and infrastructure. In fact, I think it's important to note that bridges and infrastructure that are primarily being used to support military forces are legitimate military targets. I didn't hear anything about civilian infrastructure. I didn't hear anything about civilian bridges. So let's hope we're going to stay focused on the military targets. Ground campaign, certainly I don't think the president is talking about attacking into Tehran. But a ground campaign could certainly be something like going into Kashmir. It could be going into Karg Island. I certainly hope we don't do that. I think there are better alternatives. But it's also important to note that what the president was doing was not ruling in. He was just not ruling out ground forces to keep his options open.
Right. I mean, and in a sense, I guess that's back to casting about, Brett, right? Keeping everything on the table. I want to play for you, Brett, some of what Trump said about this issue with the toll, right? Because yesterday, that really stunned the world, right? After the U.S. had said it's international waters, you can never do it, it's against all international law. Rubio has been completely clear on this issue. Then suddenly Trump comes out and says he's going to charge every ship a 20% fee. And now he's changed his mind. Here's part of why he said he's doing that.
I put it out yesterday. I thought it was good. I was called by different people, different countries, kings and emirs and all of the people that we all know and we all love. And they've been very strong partners. And they said, we'd love to do it a different way.
So, Brett, what do you think happened to make the president in less than 24 hours reverse course on something as specific and major as a 20% toll on every ship going through the strait and the U.S. taking over the strait and providing all the security so those ships could transit?
Well, I'd say two things. I think the one thing, all the Gulf states, including like Oman that works a little closely with Iran, they are totally opposed to Iran's claim of sovereignty over the strait and Iran's claim that they will charge a fee. So the Gulf is united kind of with us against that. So then for the president to come out and say, actually, we're going to protect it and we'll charge an even higher fee was completely contradictory and counterproductive to everything we're trying to do. I'd secondly say, Aaron, that kind of that'd be a good problem to have if we were able to guard the strait and protect shipping. The issue here is that Iran is using the kind of ancient advantage of terrain and the modern advantage of drone warfare. And these drones can be fired from 1,000 kilometers away, even farther away, and hit a slow-moving tanker. And that is what they're doing to hold the strait hostage. It is very hard to stop. I dealt with this in the last White House in the Red Sea when the Houthis, an Iranian proxy group, was targeting ships in the Red Sea. We had a naval coalition. It's very difficult to stop. So I'd like to know how we're going to be the guardian of the strait. I think that would be great if we could do it, but it's a very difficult equation, as General Kimmitt, I think, knows extremely well.
And General Kimmitt, the Iranian army is also saying they're going to respond, okay? And they've already claimed, again, I'm not sure what of this has been true, but they've obviously shown an ability to do real damage to U.S. bases, U.S. missile interceptors and aircraft. They now say they struck a U.S. base in Jordan where F-18 fighter jets are stationed, and that they're going to continue doing this until final victory is achieved. General, you know, it can almost sound like a tit for tat until suddenly people die. I mean, how concerned are you tonight, given where this is at this moment, about the risks to the tens of thousands of U.S. troops that are in the Middle East now?
Well, I think both Brett and I are concerned about that significantly because, again, all we need is one mistake made by an air defense artilleryman who misses a missile coming in. I mean, we saw that in al-Assad inside of Iraq, where we luckily did not lose a significant number of troops. But when you have a large concentration of them, as we do in Kuwait, Al Udeid in Qatar, and some of the other bases in UAE, that could certainly happen. Listen, I think it's important to go back to Brett's comment. It is clear that if the United States is the unilateral protector of the Gulf, of the Strait of Hormuz, that will not work. The fact is we are belligerent in this conflict, and for us to try to control it is a war situation. Either they have it or we don't. But as we did with the Counter-Piracy Coalition, and we did in the Tanker War in 1981 to 1988, we used non-belligerence in that operation. This is a great opportunity for the British, the French, the Germans to come in and run a maritime escort operation through the Strait of Hormuz. It tells the Iranians you have a choice. You can either let these people take the commercial traffic through, or you can fire on them. And at this point, you now have a war with Germany, the United Kingdom, and France. Now, I think we all understand why the Allies have not been rushing to our assistance in this, but there are options other than a unilateral operation.
Targeted by the U.S. were on routes connected to the city of Bandar Abbas, which is home to an Iranian military naval base, as you well know. What does that signal to you about the U.S. strategy that's unfolding right now?
Two things, Wolf. First, it is going to attempt to cut off, to kill the assets that could be used to close the Strait of Hormuz. I've been to Bandar Abbas before the revolution, obviously. It's a very important naval port for the Iranians, and cutting it off has high military utility. So point one, go after the places where the Iranians have weapons systems that help them close the strait. Point two, in general, going after infrastructure like bridges, roads, puts economic pressure on Iran. I think that is part of the administration's strategy here to get Iran back to the table. In a phrase, what they're doing is escalate in order to de-escalate, meaning go after economic targets, military targets, put pressure on more attacks with the hope that you can then de-escalate and the Iranians will come back to the table. That's the strategy.
And as you know, Iran is now retaliating big time with attacks on various U.S. military assets across the Gulf region. The Iranian military claims it targeted a U.S. air base in Qatar and for the first time a U.S. base in Syria. It also says it destroyed a long-range radar system and several U.S. refueling aircraft. If all of this is true, Admiral, how does this impact the U.S. military's abilities in the region?
So far, we have sufficient combat power in order to overcome the level of strikes you're seeing from Iran. And let's be honest here about the numbers. The U.S. is launching dozens and dozens of strikes a day at this point, far less than during the initial wave, but 100, 200 strikes a day. Iran is responding with 10, maybe 15 strikes. So over time, that's going to favor the U.S. military capacity to continue these strikes. However, it does show the Iranians are increasing their ability to go after their neighbors. That ought to concern us because if they start going after Gulf oil and gas infrastructure, that'll have big economic downside for the Western economies as well.
Yeah, so far they're going after U.S. military sites in these friendly Arab Gulf nations like the United Arab Emirates, Qatar, Kuwait, Oman, elsewhere in the region. These are all very close friends, allies of the United States. The U.S. has major bases in the United Arab Emirates and in Qatar at Camp Asaliya, the El Udeid Air Base. I've been to those facilities. They're really home to much of the U.S. military central command in that region. And the Iranians keep attacking those U.S. sites. This is very significant, isn't it?
It is indeed. And I want to draw a line under one other kind of troubling item that's surfacing, and that is Iran starting to talk about closing not the Strait of Hormuz, which they've effectively done, but closing what is called the Bab el-Mandeb. It's at the very bottom of the map you're showing, at the bottom of the Arabian Peninsula, the bottom of the Red Sea. They've got the Houthis there who have capability to attack commercial shipping. If you close that choke point, that closes effectively the Suez Canal right under the word Israel on your map. That is a major global choke point, just like the Strait of Hormuz. If the Iranians can push the Houthis into doing that, you've opened a new front, a Western front, if you will, in this war. So that is one to watch and one to be concerned about in the weeks ahead.
In his address, his primetime televised address last night, the president said one sentence, and it was a total of about 7 seconds, we checked, related to the war with Iran in his nearly 27-minute speech overall. When he first announced he was going to give a televised address, I thought it would be on the war with Iran, but it wasn't. It was on election, so-called election interference. Was that, in your view, a missed opportunity for President Trump?
It was, and the numbers are very clear on this. This war is unpopular across the entire political spectrum. President Trump's own popularity overall is as low as it's been throughout his 2 terms of the presidency. And I think Americans just don't have a sense of what's the exit strategy, what's the end game here. And when you start getting those questions from the public, that's the time to do that nationally televised address and reassure people and tell them you have a plan and tell them what the next step is. I'm with you. That's what I was hoping to hear when I caught a snippet of a televised presidential address. It's about elections. Those are important, but I think the public would, at this point, like to hear what's the next move in the Middle East.